Hi, and welcome back to Under the Liberty Tree. This is our fifth, yes, I'm still counting, our fifth episode.
You really
And
are going to count
I don't
everything.
know, we'll see. And we're excited with all the feedback that we've gotten. We really appreciate everything that you're sharing with us. We do want you to like and share this and all the stuff that you're supposed to say in podcasts. But we're just going to jump right into it.
Yeah.
What do you have?
Okay, first thing, we're going to do a thing.
We do a thing.
On our first, well, speaking of counting, we talked about hyperbole and how,
House of Hyperbole.
yeah, how so. And so if you want to hear about that, go to the first one, House of Hyperbole. And we talked about how it's used in gaslighting. It's a tool, a big tool of gaslighting. So what we're going to do is a hyperbole of the week.
Okay,
All right.
what is it?
Because I think it's really good to keep that
I
front and
like it.
center to say,
Hyperbole of
wait
the
a minute,
week.
let's take a step back from what they're saying. It's like, no, that is really exaggerated, which is what hyperbole is.
Actually,
Exaggerated.
one of my stories is a hyperbole.
Okay, and this one was from yesterday. Jobs report came out. January jobs report. Everybody is agog, right? Over the January jobs report. Biden is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Okay, so yesterday Biden said in his very rambly, long,
Wow.
weird speech. Okay, so he said, I'm not really sure if this is hyperbole of the week or lie of the week, but it could be both. We have created more jobs in 2 years than any presidential term within 2 years. That's the strongest 2 years of job growth in history by a long shot. Okay, so that's hyperbole, like more than Washington, more than after World War II.
Yeah.
Like that's not even now. Look, Republicans do it too. They finagle the jobs report. They finagle the unemployment rate to
Sure.
make them say
Every
they both do
politician
it.
does.
Both sides do it. Right. So we're not saying this is a Democrat thing, although I think they're
Right.
more guilty of it. So he says in 2 years, best 2 years of any president ever, best 2 years in history. But here, where the when you look at the facts of where the jobs came from, which I had a hard time finding, frankly, I had to really dig down to get this. Okay, so those jobs that they're saying was at about a half million,
Half a
120,
million new jobs.
yeah, 128,000 of them were in leisure and hospitality. Almost all of them were in bars and restaurants. So tell me, how did magically all those restaurant jobs from bars and restaurants, it's they're the states that are finally opening up all their bars and restaurants. Duh.
Right.
It's not rocket science. So the other jobs, professional and business services, 82,000. Government, 74,000 jobs in one
So
year.
that's one fifth, one sixth.
It's huge. And of those, I found this very interesting. This one was really, I had to really dig to find this. Okay, those 74,000 jobs, they were in, all of it was in education, in state education and local education. State government education, 35,000. Local government education, 19,000. Now, what specifically they were in education, I could not find.
Mm.
They could be teaching hires, maybe from schools that are finally opening up in places that had been locked down forever, or preschools that were finally opening. I mean, it could be that. Or what I suspect is we're going to get into DEI. Um,
Yes, we are.
and so I think it's Biden's initiatives on and states' initiatives on doing inclusivity programming and reprogramming and deprogramming. I have a suspicion that is where those jobs are going. And so they were also in healthcare, but most of these were from like government and jobs that had been gone from the
From the
pandemic.
lockdowns. Well, not from the pandemic, from the
From the
lockdowns.
lockdowns. But also, can we just notice too that what happens on Tuesday night was Tuesday night?
State of the Union.
Yeah. Shocking. Is it just a coincidence
Yeah, so
that we get an amazing jobs report the Friday before the State of the Union? And
right. They wouldn't fudge those
do you
numbers.
think that
They wouldn't
Biden,
they
yeah, do
wouldn't
you think
fudge
that
those numbers.
Biden will mention, according to the Associated Press, that in January, Layoffs, I just said layoffs. Layoffs in the US hit a more than 2-year high in January as tech firms cut jobs at the second highest pace on record, nearly 103,000 jobs. So, do you think Biden will mention those? I don't think so.
No, I mean, why would he?
No.
So, two things that I think of when I think about the whole tech layoffs and jobs reports is number one, they changed the reporting on this a long time ago. They've created a
Every January. They retool it every
right.
January.
So they've created a whole regime around changing the numbers to suit their numbers. By the way, I'm happy for anybody who gets their job. That's wonderful. It's great.
Yeah.
But the second thing is the pandemic. Of course, we we had a terrible loss. I just saw a meme on Twitter about this, like, oh, look, Trump lost this many jobs during the course of his 4 years of president, and president. But that's just because where you put the line and where policy starts to kick in, like it doesn't matter. The bottom line is it doesn't matter. You can have more jobs and all that stuff, and everybody's gonna who likes that is good for their sides gonna fluff it up. But the truth is, we're in hard times, and everybody knows it. Big report on jobs,
Yeah.
but eggs. All I have to do is say when I'm with a client or a potential client, all I have to do is say eggs, and that's all I got to do is say the word eggs.
It used to be the cheapest meal of the week. And now it's as expensive
And now
as
it's cheaper to get,
hamburgers.
yeah, right.
It's crazy.
What else?
Okay, next thing we have, let's do our Florida spotlight. I know you have a Florida
I have some
story.
Florida stories. Yeah, my whole thing is Florida.
Okay, we're going to do a Florida spotlight, not because we live in Florida, which we love.
We do.
We love having Governor DeSantis.
We do.
He's we want to spotlight it because he's doing what every governor should be doing. It's if every governor, if every Republican governor did what DeSantis is doing, our republic would be saved. It would be. So here's what he did this week. He's getting the credit for it, but it is the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation.
Well, but they're doing it
It,
his
it is.
direction. He's the governor.
DeSantis is fulfilling his promise. He revoked the liquor license of the Orlando Philharmonic Plaza Foundation, which hosted that perverted drag show
Oh,
two
this was
weeks
the one.
ago
Okay.
that permitted children. And
Okay.
if you want to just go Google it, we're not going to show any clips from it
No.
because it was disgusting.
Yeah.
And he
Plus,
revoked.
we haven't got the technology yet, but we're getting there. We're working every day.
If
We're
it
working a little
got to
bit more.
me, we would just be showing cartoon like pieces of paper. But but he fulfilled his promise. Look, that is what we have to do. You can't liberty is one thing and having the freedom to go to a drag show, strip show, peep show, whatever you want to call them. Uh, you can't have this open for children. You can't. I don't,
Right.
and that's, I would go a lot further than that. But at the very least, can we just all agree that no children should be admitted to these
No,
things?
we
And
can't.
if you
No,
do,
we can't all agree on that. I mean, that's the point. We can't all
well,
agree
no,
on it.
it just should be.
No, I,
We just
I
all
understand
agree.
that, but I'm saying this is the problem, right? This is where we're at, is that we can't all agree. And because Republicans, now we're getting into the thing I want to talk about, because Republicans have a default position,
Yeah.
conservatives have a default position of limited government, they take that to mean not powerful government. I'm getting ahead of myself. Go ahead.
No, go right ahead. You go.
You sure?
Yeah.
Because I want to jump into this.
No,
Okay.
I've been talking. I'm into this is
So
what we're usually
so
like. Talk,
Chris,
talk, 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 talk.
so Chris,
Everybody thinks you talk.
so you're talking about you were talking about Governor. I'm not sure I want to highlight or talk about what you just said. I think I'm just going to let that rest and move on. Um, you were talking about Governor DeSantis, who has been a vigorous conservative. We have always, you and I have always craved vigorous conservatives. We have always gotten warmed over campaign rhetoric and then surrender,
Mm,
right?
always.
Always. I mean, that's just always been the case. Whatever they say during the campaign, you remember
We
all
want
the way.
Obamacare.
You remember all the way back to before I ran for any office. We were sitting in Tunkhannock, Pennsylvania, and we were listening to,
Way back.
I'm going all the way
That's
back,
way
and we were
here.
listening to this red meat speech from a congressman who never did anything of significance in terms of leadership. And everybody there was just like, we know he doesn't mean a word he's saying. We're going to hear it, blah, blah, blah.
Everybody knows it.
And Governor DeSantis is not that guy.
No.
And by the way, he's not been that guy. And this isn't a DeSantis campaign commercial. I actually don't necessarily want him to run because I don't want to share him. I'm kind of greedy. He's doing such a great job here in Florida. And also, until we fix the state level elections like Pennsylvania and Arizona, it's gonna be very, yeah. And look, by the way, we publish on YouTube, but we also publish on Gab because we are going to say things that get us banned. And I'm going to talk about Steven Crowder in a little bit because he said something on the Tim Pool show that I want to highlight because he's right. This part he's right about, but it's not the win that he thinks it is. Anyway, Governor DeSantis has gone to all the college bureaucrats and said, I want to know what you're spending on diversity initiatives. And the Daily Wire reported yesterday.
Spell that out for anybody who doesn't know what DEI is.
Oh, well, it's diversity, equity, inclusion. And what it means is racism. That's what it means. It means we're going to look at people's skin color and make judgments about them based on their skin color. And Governor DeSantis went out to all the state universities and said, I want to know who's running these, how much you're spending on it, what the curriculum is, all that stuff. It turns out the Daily Wire is reporting that the data that they're getting back is not accurate. The notice from DeSantis's press secretary, Brian Griffith, said that the administrators were charged with accounting for the expenditures and they significantly misreported and underreported the numbers. Griffin said these bureaucracies are more interested in protecting their status quo and furthering their agenda rather than delivering a quality education. And he said that DeSantis is going to work to ensure a full and truthful compilation of the initiatives that are gathered. It's a huge deal, and we'll link to this story. But the other side of this is we're once again going to discuss kind of a friendly fire incident. The friendly fire comes from none other than the Daily Wire's Dr. Jordan Peterson, who has actually made some significant missteps. I'm just going to focus on this one, but he's actually made some significant missteps in recent days.
I don't listen to him, so I don't follow it. Not because I
Yeah,
disagree. I just you can only
there's only so much you can listen to.
people.
So he went on the Joe Rogan podcast, and while he was on Rogan's podcast, he mentioned what Governor DeSantis is doing specifically in relationship to critical race theory and these diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. And the interesting thing about this, of course, is that the only reason we know the name Jordan Peterson is because when Canada was contemplating legislation that said that you must use the pronoun that a person selects for themselves. And if they change it the next day, you must use that and you must use the next one and the next one. And Peterson simply said, I'm not going to allow the state to control what I say. I'm not going to let the state tell me. So that was his principled position. The state doesn't have the authority to tell me what to say or not to say.
Yeah.
And now he's looking at what Governor DeSantis is doing and what Chris Rufo, who is the representative, yeah, Chris Rufo is the representative, and he's come into the college in Sarasota called New College.
Yeah.
He's been put on the board of trustees. They fired the president this past week. They had a meeting.
Oh, that was fun.
Yeah, it was very interesting. They aired the grievances. They even took a email death threat, which wasn't really a death threat. It was a "you better wear a flak jacket," kind of comment. And they tried to the left from the administration of New College tried to use that to shut down the meeting. And Rufo said, "No, we're not shutting down the meeting." And they actually got the president of the college, who was away at a meeting, on the phone, and the president's, you couldn't hear what the president was saying to Rufo, but Rufo's like, well, thank you very much for your input, but we've already voted to do this, and we're not going to let there be the most violent, the most angry voices be the veto.
It was awesome.
Which is great.
The way
So Jordan Peterson, this is what Jordan Peterson said on Joe Rogan. I want you to hear this.
I'm an admirer in many ways of what's going on in Florida, with DeSantis, but him and Rufo, who I also think has got a bit of a clue, are trying to, what would you say, limit or even ban critical race theory. And the problem with that is you can't define it, right?
Right.
So how do you control something you can't define? And that
Wait, yes, we can. We can define critical race theory.
Is this my
they-
segment or yours?
but you're playing this clip.
I know, because I'm going somewhere, but all right, we can go here.
We can define it because they define it.
Yeah. And
All
he,
you have to do is go on their websites and they
and,
have everything
and he,
defined.
listen, he goes on to define it. Watch.
answer is you battle it out on the battleground of ideas. Because as soon as you start to try to define it and then try to censor it, well, first of all, that's just going to grow because that's how those things work. You know, like
When he says that's going to grow, he means censorship, right?
But there has to be a
Here goes.
where does critical race theory shade into Marxism? Well, who the hell knows? Where does Marxism
Huh?
shade into socialism? That's even harder question. Then where does socialism shade into, just being on the side of the working class? Well, all that's fuzzy beyond belief. And so once you get to the point where the government has to step in and regulate, say, what education systems are doing, you're already in deep trouble.
Now, here's the problem with that. At the very end of that, he says, once the government starts to regulate what education systems are teaching, you're in deep trouble. No, that's not true because it's the government school. It is a government school. Now, he goes on. There's one other thing I want you to hear.
But trying to draw the lines, how are you going to do that? And then, of course, you enable inevitably, no matter what your goal is to begin with, you're going to control a certain form, let's say, of pathological communication, misinformation. That's just going to play into the hands of people who like to censor, and that's just as likely on the right as it is on the left. So, no, it's a real dangerous game.
That's the key phrase right there. It's a dangerous game, says Jordan Peterson. He's talking about these efforts to stop essentially funding racial hate. And there's the mischaracterization. This is why I think Peterson is wrong about this. And I do like Jordan Peterson. He's got,
That makes me really upset.
yeah,
Makes
don't.
me
Don't.
really
He's,
upset.
Rufo's put out a nice video. These guys are going to have a debate about it. We're going to hash this out. And that's what we should do.
There's so much that is wrong about that.
Which I'm about to tell you. Here's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to do my Jordan.
I'll just sit here and eye roll.
I'm going to try to
You
do
speak,
my
I'll
Jordan Peterson response
and I'll raise my eyebrow. I'll do my eyebrow thing.
to Jordan Peterson. Well, yeah, sure. But the inevitable question that raises is dangerous compared to what exactly? The current approach of conservatives not using power has repeatedly and ineluctably led us to do insane things like chopping off kids' private parts and dressing them up in stereotypical attire and calling it gender affirming. And anyone who raises even the slightest concern gets branded a transphobe, whatever that is, fired, banned from social media, and in some states, charged with hate crimes. So conservatives should just continue funding whatever the left wants other kids to get turned into little Joseph Mengele or John Money sex experiments. Good luck with that. And that's what Jordan Peterson would say to Jordan Peterson if he was in a different frame of mind.
What have I said about you doing
Imitations.
accents
All
and
right.
imitations?
All right. So anyway, the point is that Peterson is wrong not because he's wrong about censorship, but because he's doing what I call a category error. He's saying that when the government that pays for all this education says we the people get to control what gets said by our paid representatives, he's calling that censorship. That's not censorship. Censorship would be if Governor DeSantis said what we've been told he said in the bill regarding not talking about gender ideology to small children until they're 9 years old, as if 9-year-olds are ready for that. And he's pretending that's censorship. It's not. The taxpayers pay the bill. The taxpayers get to say what happens with their money. If it's a private school and they want to teach that, and parents want to pay to send their kids to a private school and teach that, that is censorship if they were to try to go into that environment. But this is public school. It's public elementary, it's public high school, it's public college, it's public graduate school. He's talking about in public schools. You want to do that stuff? Start your own colleges. But if the state's running them, the state government should vigorously promote the ideas that the voters elected. And DeSantis was not secretive about this.
No.
He did not hide what his agenda was.
No,
that
he
was
make it the Hillsdale of the South.
that Well, but I mean, in his campaign and in his previous 4 years, he
Mm,
did not hide his goal, which was to restore traditional values and traditional restraints on
mhm.
government funded programs. So conservatives have all the power and then they cede it. They win the intellectual argument, right? We
Yeah.
we persuade people, yeah, it's not a great idea to go trans the kids, right? That's just not appropriate. But then when it comes time to take action, we're not willing to take the action. And that's the problem. This is the attack on Christian nationalism.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong. It doesn't matter where our viewpoints come from. It doesn't matter if they come from the Bible or from the Quran or whatever. If you're a citizen and you're obeying the law, then you have a right to vote. And whatever reasons you choose to use to cast your vote, whatever worldview you bring to the table, whether it's atheist or whatever, that's your legitimate vote. And then once people get elected, those people get lent the power. Now, the other thing is what DeSantis is talking about is money. He's talking about taxpayer money
Right.
going to fund these
Mhm.
things. Well, if the taxpayers don't want to pay for it, they don't want to pay for it. And the taxpayers have a right to control their money.
So there's a few things that I was kind of upset about hearing in the
With
beginning.
Peterson, sure,
Well,
sure.
he's talking about, they're talking specifically about colleges,
Yeah.
universities, right? And so we have to, they're specifically talking about state schools that get government funding
In
to
this
go to,
round, but he's
in
already
this
done
round.
it at the elementary school
And
level.
we're talking about schools, and we have become so gaslit. Like, I am a
It's a
teacher.
perfect example.
I am a teacher. I've been there. I've been in school. I quit 30 years ago to homeschool our kids, our 6 kids, because I couldn't stand the way the day went for kids. There was so much wasted time. And that was 30 years ago. And still the government mandated then. The government mandates now what homeschoolers have to learn.
Yeah.
Okay, but so you have the gaslighting over all of these years that it's the government that gets to tell the schools and the teachers what they have to teach when that's not what they're there for. It's the parents who should be the ones to tell the school board what curricula they're going to purchase.
So
That's
you're when
it's
you say government, but when you say government, you mean federal government.
federal government. The federal
Right, right,
government
right.
has come in and taken over so much because the schools had said, look, we need so much more money and the state doesn't have enough. So we're going to get, and then with COVID, they got even more federal money. And a lot of people don't even know all this other stuff that they get federal money for things like all kinds of psychiatric diagnoses, all kinds of learning disability diagnoses. Those get federal funds. And so the more diagnoses you get for learning disabilities, you get more federal funding.
Right.
It goes to the state, but eventually
Uh,
you get it from the federal government. And then if they give money, then they say, well, then we get to dictate. I mean, they're dictating. I'd like to sit down with you and say, like, the government is dictating that teachers have to teach gender education
right,
to kindergartners.
right.
So,
And again, just to clarify, when you say the government, you mean the federal government,
federal
right?
government. Well,
Because
state government too.
well, different states are set up different ways, right? Some states, all the power is vested in the
It
central
depends on
state,
the
like
state,
Florida.
their
Florida,
constitution.
right? Florida
Yeah,
is a state with most of the power in the center of the
yeah,
state at in the government. Pennsylvania is a commonwealth, so local districts have it. But the where DeSantis is exercising the power is where it should be. And I don't know if you remember this, but that was Ronald Reagan's thing was
yeah,
abolish the
yeah,
Department of Education
yeah.
because Jimmy Carter started it. We're talking about 1976. We're not talking about the
What's
1800s.
his name? Bill
Bill Bennett.
Bill Bennett. Thank you.
But I'm saying the Department of Education as a federal entity didn't exist in the 20s and 30s. There was no government involvement in lower education.
Yeah, but
There,
I'm sorry, go
no,
ahead.
there was some in higher education, but in lower education, that was all states and
Yeah,
localities. And all DeSantis is doing is saying, well, if the state is going to pay,
yeah,
then the state is going to make the rules. And Peterson's argument that, well, but this is a dangerous game because he said this is a dangerous game and I'm just a little worried about this. Well, this is how we have lost everything because we always say, well, now that we've got the power, they might use it against us. Well, guess what? They're going to
Yeah.
anyway.
And see, that's where that was the other thing that I wanted to mention about that was he was saying it's what did he say? It's blurry. You can't you
The lines are blurry
the
about
lines are
critical
blurry
race
between
theory.
critical race theory and Marxism, and even blurrier with socialism, only because we're not teaching it. We're not teaching what Marxism is. We're not teaching what socialism is. And yeah, they are two different overlapping things. But because we're not teaching those things in school, so yeah, they are blurry because kids and students in universities, heck, most adults don't even know the difference between them. I don't even know what fascism is, and everybody keeps crying fascism. They don't even know what it is. And so, yeah, I mean, he's right about it in that aspect. It's blurry because nobody knows what they're talking about. But if we taught it, if teachers were taught to teach what Marxism, of course, the union is Marxist. So, anyway, I'm done ranting about
Okay, so that leads me to the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which is Grutter versus Bollinger. So, one of the cases that was heard last fall and which will be talked about with the Supreme Court coming up probably in May or June is a case having to do with critical race theory applied. Now, they're not calling it that, but that's essentially what it is. And the case Grutter versus Bollinger was a case that was tried in April of 2003. And it was the University of Michigan Law School, one of the nation's top law schools, had an official admissions policy that seeks to achieve student body diversity through compliance. And they focus on academic ability coupled with a flexible assessment of their talents, experiences, potential, and the policy requires admissions officials to evaluate each application based on all the information. But part of it was they had to look at soft variables like enthusiasm and then ultimately racial and ethnic status.
of course.
Now, in 2003, the Supreme Court ruled that because that wasn't the only criteria,
Mm-hmm.
that for now this could stand. But Sandra Day O'Connor, one of Reagan's appointees, said she made a prediction at that time. She said, in about 25 years, not even that will be permitted. That is the idea that you can take race into account at all, because we will have gone so far away from
Yeah.
slavery in the 1800s and Jim Crow laws in the 1900s that, and they all, the majority, even back then, agreed this has to end. She said 25 years. It's been 19, and
Hmm.
this case is going to be decided. Now, this case that's currently being looked at is a lawsuit filed against Harvard College and the University of North Carolina by a group of students called Students for Fair Admissions. They maintain that Harvard is violating Title 6, yeah, VI is 6 of the Civil Rights Act, because the Civil Rights Act bars entities, and again, here's the key, that receive federal funding. So again, this is not about censorship. This is about if you take up, he who pays the piper picks the tune, right? And that's essentially what we're talking about. If you receive federal funding from discriminating based on race, I'm sorry, that if you receive federal funding, then you have to follow Title 6. And what these schools were doing was discriminating based on race because Asian American applicants are less likely to be admitted than similarly qualified white, black, or Hispanic applicants. And the argument, according to SCOTUS blog and others, when it was being held in October, really strongly indicated that the justices were going to strike this down. So we are going to see what DeSantis
It'll
is
be
doing.
interesting to see what happens.
Well, what DeSantis is doing is very much tied in to what this decision is going to be. So I just wanted to kind of give you a
How
heads
can
up.
we connect those two?
That's coming. And here's how I know that even those who don't like what this ruling is going to be know what it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
The College Board. So you know what collegeboard.org is? Like,
Yeah.
these are the people who do the
Yeah.
college boards.
Yeah.
They are already publishing articles. See what that says? Prepare now for the 2023
Yeah.
ruling.
Wow.
They say, regardless of your current planning stage, you can
Hmm.
prepare now by reviewing, and then they have a whole website called Access and Diversity Collaborative's Action Guide for Higher Education. The guide summarizes key conversations held in the summer and fall to discuss how they're going to prepare for the decision and take proactive steps to prepare for an array of possible
Wow.
outcomes. They know
They know
that
something.
this is coming to an end because it has to.
Yeah.
Because the very anti-liberty idea that you should look at a person's skin color
Mhm.
and make a judgment about their capability, about their background, about their knowledge, about their political views
Mhm.
is antithetical to our core principles. Not that we've always carried them out. That's quite obvious that we haven't. But Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, they all the great civil rights leaders
Mhm.
called us back to that statement.
Yeah.
Equality before the law, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
That each person gets to define for themselves what that looks like, and that no one should be able to discriminate based on race. Well, these college admissions more and more are doing that. They're making anti-white or no white spaces. They're making all black or all POC, person of color spaces, and it's just illegal. It's blatantly illegal. And I think that's what this Supreme Court decision is going to do. I think it's going to hit that.
I think, I'm glad you brought that out, um, tying that to what DeSantis is doing, because I think we have to tie that to, oh, that horrible video. I can't, and we're not going to play anything forever, but it's been all over Twitter, social media, of the 9-year-old girl getting pummeled on the bus.
I didn't see that. I don't
Oh,
want to see that.
it's heartbreaking, and it's really hard to talk about because like, how does that even
I didn't see
happen?
that.
It happens because of the slippery slope of what you're talking about. Now we have, well, it's a 9-year-old girl and her 10-year-old brother who get the ever loving life beat out of them by black senior high school boys. This 9-year-old, like, she's 9, she's little, and they are pummeling her. Now, I saw one, I don't know who like all these rappers are or whatever, This one guy was ranting and saying, "But she hit first." I am sorry if a 9-year-old hits a big high school
Well,
kid and you start pummeling her, I think that but and now there's like the charges against him are so minimal,
really?
so
What
minimal.
state did
It's
this
like
happen in?
Florida, near Miami. Yeah.
That doesn't make sense because I think,
But see, that's
well, we'll
when
see.
it's this mindset that there are different rules based on your
Oh,
race.
so there was a racial component to this?
She's white.
Oh, gee.
Different rules for,
That is so not good.
and that's
All
really
right,
what
let's go to well, I want to go to something good. I mean, because there is good news. So one of the things that made Trump so attractive to people was he said things that everybody thought, but people didn't want to talk about because it wasn't acceptable, right? So he came down the escalator in 2015
yeah,
and started talking about Mexico not sending us their best, which everybody knows that isn't a racist trope. That's just an observation, right?
yeah,
That this is what
yeah,
happens. And it wasn't unintentional. It was obviously intentional. So Trump, all through his campaign and through most of his presidency,
mhm,
one of the things that distinguished him was that he would say things and everybody would go on TV, all the smart people with all the polling would go on TV and they would say, well, this is the end. This is good, he's going to turn people off. And he didn't. I'm
yeah,
not saying he didn't turn people off, but it didn't end him. And it didn't end him and it didn't end him. 2020 notwithstanding, we don't need to talk about the particulars of that because there's lots of
mhm,
other people talking about that. But um, one of the things that really set him apart was he sounded different and no one led him, everyone followed him.
yeah,
That's changing. And this takes us back to Governor DeSantis. Governor DeSantis, for the last year, 2 years, has been leading on this. Glenn Youngkin has also
yeah.
started to follow
Hmm.
on this. But
Christy Nome is gone, right?
she's come back. Let's say she's come back. But the thing that just came out this week with President Trump, announcing his plan. Well, I'll let him say it, and I want to just comment on it in a second here. But this is former President Trump talking about what he plans to do when yeah, and it's not working. This is the thing I feared most about this little plan was I was hoping that this would work perfectly, and it doesn't seem to be. Let's see if we can get it to go. No, it's not. Oh, here it goes. Here we go.
The left-wing gender insanity being pushed on our children is an act of child abuse. Very simple. Here's my plan to stop the chemical, physical, and emotional mutilation of our youth. On day one, I will.
All right, that's enough.
Yeah.
My point in playing that is this is not Trump's issue.
No.
Trump in 2016 famously came out and said, "I'm the first pro-gay marriage president." When he was asked the question about men going into women's bathrooms back when he was president, he's like, "Well, what's wrong with them just going where they are?" You know, right? And he didn't really take, right, didn't take much. And he said, "Well, they can come into my bathrooms in Trump Tower." He is doing something that is not characteristic of him. And I take this as a good sign. Here's why. Both President Donald Trump and Governor Ron DeSantis are famous for not using polling and for doing things that those in the establishment, those with the big charts and the data and the crosstabs for the polling, say are not smart issues. These are not winning issues, don't touch them. And both Trump and DeSantis, in their own ways, have for a long time, DeSantis much longer than Trump, have demonstrated their ability to lead. I think this is a huge win across the board on what are being called culture war issues. And that's just a pejorative. They're just issues. They're just issues like any other issues. You can call them culture war, whatever.
Just issues.
Because culture does matter. I mean, culture is who we are. This is us, right? What's that show? I don't even know if that's good. So
It's a word that I'm really sick of, actually.
so I don't what this is us. Oh, culture.
Culture.
So my point though is I'm very encouraged by this trend because with DeSantis's major win, and this goes back to Jordan Peterson. When Republicans get a major win, not since Ronald Reagan have we had, other than Donald Trump, a president who actually tried to do what he said he was going to do. Once he got in, he didn't make excuses. And we're starting to see that at the state level across the board. We're starting to see more and more governors exercise the power that the voters have given them. And I think that's a huge good sign. So I think there's lots of reason to be optimistic about the future because when you look at the people who tend to be able to see into the future instinctively, like Trump and DeSantis, they are moving in this direction. So I think it's good news.
So speaking
I'm
of
encouraged.
the future, what do you think is the future of the GOP? After this week's vote for chair, no surprise, Rana won. And no surprise, even on a secret ballot, she won with 50% so that it didn't go into
Yeah, so I
second
think
vote,
so I think that
which means it wasn't really a secret ballot.
so
They had it, they
there
made
how many people were there voting?
168.
Yeah, and were they known? Did we know who was going to vote? Like, were the people who cast the vote known people? Did they have addresses and names?
Yes, if
Yeah,
you know who the committee people, the
right,
state
right,
committee people are.
right. So that's my point. So there's nothing, you said it, there's nothing surprising about that outcome. That was always foreordained. And the party is not going to be saved or lost on the basis of that. President Trump has already demonstrated that the Republican Party can be wrestled into doing things it doesn't want to do.
But see, that is what is weird. Rana didn't do a good job for him.
It doesn't.
Yet he supported her, even though
So what do you,
most of his supporters were the ones calling their committee people and saying, vote for Harmeet.
honey, Trump is broken. Trump is broken.
Well,
He's
no,
not 2015 Trump.
I know,
He's
but
broken.
it's not my, even though if he's our nominee, I will still vote for him. Like,
Right, but he's broken.
but he's broken.
So you can't.
DeSantis is breaking him.
So you can't. No, no. The media broke him. The loss of the 22. The law. Well, DeSantis is certainly irritating him, and that is exactly what I.
My question is, what is the future of the, I think,
Yeah, I don't think this race for leadership has anything to do with the future of the Republican Party.
I think it does. I think it has a lot to do with it. I think it has to do with the PACs. They're going to come out um, playing against the traditional GOP super donors, against the log cabin Republicans. I think we're going to have, and the thing is that I heard some, I don't remember who I was listening to this week, and they were saying, like, there needs to be a third, there is never,
No.
ever going to be a third party in this country. I don't
Well, I
care.
mean, maybe there will be, but not for a long time.
There won't be. We are a two-party country. That's the way it is. Their libertarians are not ever going to
Right.
be the third party.
Right. I don't think anybody.
Occasionally, there's a Ross Perot
Right.
comes in and messes things up, right? But we're a two-party country, and I wish that we could just get
R-
over that.
Right.
But
But
the thing
you
is that I think I I think that it's going to go the way of the Whigs.
wait, you just said it's not gonna.
No,
Now you're saying it's
I
gonna go
said the
away.
Republican Party is going to go the way of the Whigs.
Oh, you just mean there'll be a
I do.
sure,
I
sure. And
think
I was actually getting ready to say,
this is a further indication.
but I don't think that's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is you're going to continue. I think what you're going to do, you're going to continue to see the rise of guys like our congressman, Matt Gaetz, who are, I mean, what is far more consequential is how long it took for McCarthy to get power and the concessions he had to make. The Ronna McDaniels, Rick Romney thing, whatever, that's irrelevant. That's an insider's game. That's an insider's game. Yeah, it is. Those were a hundred and how many people?
Not tell,
Okay, can I?
not irrelevant.
All right,
You are wrong.
vote below. No,
You
I'm
are
not.
wrong.
It's irrelevant because that's just the shell. They knew who those people were. It was relatively easy to take big money and influence and pressure them. But at the grassroots level, which is what the Republican Party is really made up of, the grassroots, that's
They were behind Harmeet,
I'm saying that.
and that is why
And so her loss
it's just
means,
another hurdle towards death for the GOP.
but it's not because it's going to be hollowed out and then it's going to be taken back over as it is. It's a continuation
It's not going to be the same
of
GOP.
the
The
Tea
Whigs are going to go
Party.
over to the Democrats. They're going to
It's a
just
continuation of the Tea Party. It's not called the Tea Party, but it's this
yeah, don't call
ongoing
it the Tea Party. Yeah, please don't call it the
it's
Tea
this
Party.
ongoing grassroots movement. It's we the people saying to our elected officials, not good enough, not good enough, not good enough. And the people, Ron DeSantis was pretty much alone when he founded the Freedom Caucus. But the people who are following in his footsteps when he was in Congress are growing stronger and stronger and stronger. The
Yeah.
speakership fight, that was a shocking thing because that's supposed to be a foregone conclusion. They're identified people who cast those votes, each congressman. And even with all that power and pressure, those 20 stood strong,
Yeah.
even though some of my good friends on the right were attacking them and saying this is a waste of time. It wasn't a waste of time. This is my point about DeSantis. It is not a waste of time when you have been delegated authority by the people to do what those people want. That's not a waste of time. That's exactly what you should do. And I think the rise of the power of Matt Gaetz, the rise of the power of those 20, the concessions and would you agree that Speaker McCarthy is doing things you would not have thought he would do?
True, but he also yesterday said that the officer who killed Ashley Babbitt was doing his job. So
Well,
they're
McCarthy's going to
doing
McCarthy.
exactly what I thought
Right.
McCarthy would do.
McCarthy's McCarthy. He's going to do McCarthy. But my point is their ability to hold a lockstep on this thing and to predetermine it, it's not the same as it was when I ran for state senate, when you ran for state rep. It's starting to turn. They're losing. And when I say they, I mean the establishment GOP is losing their power. They're not going to give it up easily. Don't get me wrong. They're not just going to walk away and go, oh, well, we quit. We're going to leave.
That's why I'm saying this is one step closer to the death of the GOP and the rise of a new Republican Party.
All right. Well, join in and comment below, share, like, all that good stuff.
He's right.
Final thing that I want to
You always
mention.
end up saying, honey, how did you know? You were right. right?
I want to just revisit briefly, very briefly, the whole Steven Crowder kerfuffle.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I do. Because he went on Tim Pool, and of the whole interview he did with Tim Pool, there was one clip out of a what, 2-something hour interview. There
Okay.
was one clip that Steven Crowder put up.
Oh,
So
really? I didn't see
so
that.
if there's any indication, yeah, I put it up on his Twitter account. If there's any indication of what Steven Crowder thought was his strongest point, this is it. So Tim Pool is
The Daily Wire. They say, here's a term sheet. You go, whoa, this is crazy.
Right.
Hey, you can't do this. The Daily Wire then says, all of a sudden, not also, but a few months later, Crowder registers Stop Big Con. Then he calls and secretly records Jeremy. He was setting us up. This email right here paints a different picture in that you talked with the Daily Wire and said, here's our issue.
Yeah.
Here's what we can't do. And they said, okay. And then sometime later, they try.
No, they said if that's the issue, this is our business model, and you
Right.
don't know business.
But then they try and poach one of your employees.
Oh, I knew that was going to be it. See, and I said that. I said he's going to make a big deal of that.
Yeah, but
I said that.
but wait a minute. That's what Tim Pool said. What Steven Crowder said is very slowly, very deliberately, this is our business model, right?
Yes.
He thinks that's his strong suit. That's exactly the weakest part of his argument. So that's
Yeah.
good. That's good Crowder, not bad Crowder. That's good Crowder because Crowder is acknowledging the truth. It is their business. It is their business model. And you're free to disagree.
Yeah.
You're free to go do it better. This is the American way.
Yeah.
So again, Stephen, if you want to prove the Daily Wire wrong, because I think the Daily Wire is doing a lot of really great stuff. I think Governor Glenn Youngkin is evidence of that. I think the result of the Virginia election empowered DeSantis. You saw DeSantis go jet fuel on the culture issues when he saw what happened in Virginia. Because if you look at the timing of that, the last year of his governorship, Governor DeSantis, last year, before he got reelected with 19 points advantage, Governor DeSantis poured it on in terms of these issues, Disney and
Yeah.
and woke culture, and he started campaigning on woke goes to die in Florida.
Yeah.
And all of that was in response to the work that the Daily Wire did by exposing what was going on in the Loudoun County School and some other areas. And then Governor Youngkin changing up his campaign to a more aggressive cultural campaign for traditional values. And again, I know the left wants to use that as a pejorative. I don't care. Call it whatever you want. I'm a Yankee. Yankee Doodle Dandy, right? You know, that was supposed to be a pejorative. And the Yankees said, yeah, okay, we're Yankees, right? So the bottom line is this is a very encouraging trend, in my opinion, and we're going to see more and more of it in the coming years. The tide is beginning to turn. The only other thing I would say to wrap up the show is make sure that you share good news with your kids. That's one of the things we're going to try to continue to do. We're going to rant and talk about things we don't like and about horrible things in our culture, but we're always going to try to talk also about good things because we have to be. And you know, the funny thing about Steven Crowder is he would often say, we're happy warriors. We're happy warriors.
He doesn't seem
But,
happy to me.
well, but that's when the cash was flowing. Sorry, but that's what happened. All right. So we'll see you next week.
See ya.
Thanks so much for joining us under the Liberty Tree.